to make money for Prigozhin, who is a thug. Western intelligence, CIA, whatnot, have been warning for several weeks that something like this was going to happen. I'm very surprised that wasn't the strategy that was employed, but it's got to be eye-opening for a lot of Russians and a lot of people in and around the Kremlin as well. He's going to 100% fall out of a window a few times, or drink some bad tea, or fall out of the plane 6 times, or whatever this happens to be. There's no way that he survives this. Basically let the f***ers fight.
Hi, David.
Nerlin, how are you?
Good. It's been a while since we did our last special episode because nothing was really happening in Ukraine front, although counteroffensive started right now and it's ongoing. But yesterday and day before, we've witnessed very interesting events, Wagner coup, or the mutiny, or putsch, call it as you want. But something happened there. So I would like to discuss that with you a little bit more.
Sure.
And try to understand what exactly was going on and what exactly happened. So as you know that Minister of Defense, they made Wagner to sign the contract with the army. So to kind of absorb Wagner by army. And the rumors are saying that at that point it was, decision was made to liquidate the Prigozhin. So do you think if Wagner was absorbed by army, like Prigozhin got to leave, or at that point it was decided that he has to be gone?
So just to begin with, we're recording this on Sunday morning, June 25th.
Yes.
It's probably about 11 o'clock. And the reason I'm accurately trying to date stamp this is because probably as we're recording this, there's been a bunch of other crazy things that have probably happened, and who knows. So just to date stamp that, this is based on obviously information that we know as of right now. With that agreement, I think what a lot of people who maybe aren't necessarily paying quite as close attention don't understand or don't realize or remember is that Wagner is basically almost like, I'm not going to say two entities, but there's Wagner forces inside that are fighting inside Ukraine, and then there's the entire Wagner presence that's present outside of Ukraine and outside of Russia. A lot of Russian foreign policy is that through Africa especially is conducted through PMCs like Wagner. So whether Prigozhin was going to be eliminated in his entirety, like eliminated, mm-hmm. I'm not going to speculate on that at the moment. Someone would still need to operate and run that extraterritorial Russian foreign policy, whatever you want to call that, in places like Africa. Prigozhin obviously knows how that all operates. Whether he would actually accept that type of demotion of not having control over the forces in Ukraine, that's obviously become very clear as to what happened. Or the good speculation that's likely what led to this absolutely wild 24 hours that we've just sort of lived through and are trying to figure out. All of us are sitting there trying to figure out what the hell just happened. So
he has his quibble with the Minister of Defense Shoigu, Mr. Sergei Shoigu, and with Gerasimov. So it seems like they were all not on the same page all this time. Was it deliberate, you think? Or, Prigozhin understood that at some point he needs to break up and kind of confront Minister of Defense. So was he preparing? Because he complained about lack of ammunition, that, there is not enough supplies going to his way. And he always claimed that he liberated, quote unquote, Bakhmut from Ukraine. They basically destroyed the whole city.
This has clearly been sort of, I think, in the at least nascent planning stages for a long time. It makes a lot more sense. All the claims of needing ammunition and not having ammunition, and blaming Shoigu and Gerasimov and for non-cooperation and all these things. That kind of break, I think, was probably going to be inevitable. Prigozhin and Wagner operate as they're not part of the Russian government. It is a private military company. It's operated as a private business to make money for Prigozhin, who is a thug. look into where Prigozhin came from, like certainly in the 90s, and behavior then and behavior since then, and etc. I think it's really important to make clear that Wagner has had mutual interests, the same mutual interest as the Russian government in terms of what it's been doing in Ukraine, but it certainly hasn't been a part of Russian policy, like in terms of subordinate to Russian policy. That's probably the words I should use. To see this type of thing happen probably isn't a surprise in the grand scheme, how this all sort of played out and the speed and everything that it sort of broke. That's more of a surprise. Although apparently Western intelligence, CIA, whatnot, have been warning for several weeks that something like this was going to happen. Putin likely knew that something, or had been warned at least, that something like this was going to happen. Yeah, so was this an inevitable break? I'm not going to say that it was inevitable. There's usually always some sort of a road that we're in a path of choices that leads to it not happening the way that it did. But at the end of the day, this is basically how it broke down. Hopefully we get a bit more clarity over time in terms of the actual sort of sequence of events that, caused what we've just seen. But that's it doesn't surprise me on the grand scheme that something like that, this kind of a break did happen. How it actually played out, there's a lot of surprises that have happened in there, but yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the straws that broke the camel's back was Putin sided with Shoigu in the meeting with the Voronezh, it's people who runs the pro-Kremlin Telegram channels about the war. The question asked about the private military organizations like ČVK, Wagner, and he said that, obviously everybody needs to sign the contract, and that was a sign that Putin is on side of the Shoigu. Let's go to the events that happened. So Prigozhin and Wagner, they started their march all the way from Donetsk region, and the first stop was Rostov, and they captured some key buildings in Rostov. And I think part of the troops remained in Rostov, and a part of the troops under the Utkin start marching towards Moscow. Do you think there was a better option for Prigozhin there? Instead of marching to Moscow, I don't know, he from the looks of it, it was clear that Voronezh also under his control, he could, barricade it and stay there as long as possible, because I think that region is really important for the supply of the Russian troops in Ukraine. He had a really good card to play with, but he kind of escalated so quickly.
I was very surprised to see a column. I'm going to refer to it as a flying column. I'm very surprised to see that type of movement moving down the M4. Part of the surprise, some of the surprise for me came from the idea that there was almost no opposition as they were moving down. Obviously, it's the Russian army move air assets against, but this entire war has basically seen the dominance of ground-based air defense systems like manpads and whatnot. So it's, shot down helicopters, etc. I was a little surprised to see them trying to move towards Moscow. That's pretty much a futile attempt. It's a 1,200 kilometer run from Rostov to Moscow. There's multiple crossings and all kinds of choke points. That type of military action from a strictly military sense, tactical sense, doesn't make any sense. From what I've seen and what I sort of understand, I'm surprised that there wasn't sort of a move to consolidate within the area around Rostov or Voronezh, even up to as far north as Voronezh, where they were very warmly welcomed and got lots of support from locals. I think give or take, the estimate is 25 to 35,000 troops, give or take, depending how many
people joined them down the line.
Yeah, and how many people were liberated and sort of joined in, and whatever that means. Why you wouldn't try to sort of consolidate a little bit, and as you said, use that as leverage. A lot of that territory is very, very important for the Russian army in terms of its logistics and supply hubs going to feed the meat grinder in Ukraine. I'm very surprised that wasn't the strategy that was employed. I am quite sure that I'm missing a key part of this picture. I think a lot of people are at that concluding stage based on what we know right now. Hopefully that sort of comes to light at some point so we get a better understanding of why that decision was made. But I mean, that was the decision that Prigozhin and Wagner leadership decided to take, and bizarre, very strange to me. So.
Yeah, I think this also showed that Russia is not super capable to defend its own territory. We see this with Belgorod, with Kursk, now with this, that, like the 25 to 35,000 people marching to capital. And you have tractors to dig the road, to block them, or do you just put the maintenance trucks together, try to block them? So do you think this is the sign that if Russia goes to war with NATO, like it's gonna be, it will end in hours, basically?
The fact that they were able to move about 800 kilometers, give or take, with no significant opposition whatsoever, and in fact, not even just lack of opposition, but active support from the populace of territory that they're moving through, I think that bodes. I'm not going to suggest that some sort of a NATO attack would ever happen. I'm not going to suggest that a NATO attack would automatically be successful simply because Prigozhin was able to march 800 kilometers unopposed. But I certainly think that with a coordinated, large-scale offensive that from anyone, whether it's NATO, whether it's Ukraine based on a breakthrough, as soon as an armed force is past the initial line of defense, the countryside seems to be wide open. Like what else is there beyond special weapons? What else is there to sort of slow down or to stop an opposing force from moving on to St. Petersburg or Moscow or wherever? It really is quite eye-opening. Certainly for myself, I'm sure it's eye-opening for a lot of people in the West. I'm sure there's lots of people that are saying, yeah, they knew that. But it's got to be eye-opening for a lot of Russians and a lot of people in and around the Kremlin as well.
Yeah, I think the tractors keep playing the key role in this war, from the beginning.
Whether it's tank recovery or whether it's trying to dig a makeshift tank trap. Yeah.
So halfway through, Prigozhin seems like he struck some kind of deal with Putin and Lukashenko, I think he trusts Lukashenko because they had in the past Belarus detained some Wagner Group members, and Prigozhin had to intervene. Then Lukashenko's son came to Prigozhin and apologized personally, and I think they built some kind of bond, and he trusts Lukashenko a little bit more at this point. So do you think he had chances? Let's say he reaches the Moscow. I think at that point he would try, he would engage with the police forces, FSB and stuff like that. Did he have, I didn't give him much chances on Friday, but Saturday, I gave him a little bit more, but even then, I don't think he had enough chances to capture the Moscow or they get the power and.
I think based on the size of the force that seemed to be moving towards Moscow, I don't give any chance of. I shouldn't say give any chance. There's always a chance. It's a very remote chance of any type of success of capturing Moscow, capturing Putin, capturing the Kremlin, whatever that end goal was supposed to be. You've got 100 to 400 vehicles, a couple of thousand men, and in that they would be expected to make a forced water crossing if the Russians blew the bridges over the Oka River. Once you get to Moscow itself, it's a huge, for those who haven't been, it's an enormous city. That's urban warfare across a massively, significantly developed and urban landscape, which certainly doesn't benefit the attacker. We saw that with, it's like Mariupol and Azovstal not that long ago. Urban warfare 100% favors the defender. I don't think that there was ever really militarily any kind of a prospect of a victory, or if there was, it was very small. Prigozhin striking a deal, however, I think we were talking about this a little bit earlier, and it's I sort of see this as being two options or two possibilities. there's the very slim possibility that Prigozhin and Wagner could actually, march to Moscow and capture and, conduct a successful coup. And then, it's like we don't have to worry about Putin anymore. Instead, we have to worry about Prigozhin, who's also just as evil, or possibly more evil. I don't know. But the other option is that he's struck this deal. And this deal, based on what I understand and how this is going to probably play out, he's going to 100% fall out of a window a few times, or drink some bad tea, or fall out of the plane 6 times, or whatever this happens to be. There's no way that he survives this. He had a very slim chance of success with the first option, and he's got 0 chance of survival on the second option. In my mind, there has to be some sort of there's something missing from the deal that we know, where he would feel comfortable in making that agreement and stepping away from Wagner the way that he has. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the coming minutes, hours, days, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, probably I think he may have some more leverage than we think. So this still is like earlier Sunday, Putin went to national television, called him a traitor, and he's going to be, persecuted, he's a criminal, and so on and so forth. Then all the criminal cases dropped. Putin fled on his plane, command room, and he tried to control the situation. So I think this is huge embarrassment and a huge blow to the self-esteem and image of the Putin, because even the people close to him, this is rumors at this point. We have no way to confirm this, but Rothenberg flew to Baku. Some other oligarch and even Mishustin tried to Medvedev. They all flew out of Moscow. Even there were rumors that the Lukashenko family flew to Turkey. So what do you think, how it will impact the Putin's rule, Putin reign? Because it's clear that country is not run by law. It's running by the, as Russians say, papanyatyam. So it's by the mafia rules, right? Because you're criminal in the morning, you'll be pardoned in the evening if we can agree on that. So how you think how it will unfold in the long run for Putin?
I think you're absolutely 100% spot on in terms of the image of Putin as the controlling strongman. And this doesn't necessarily have to be the image abroad so much as, think about what the domestic impact is going to look like. He rules through like strongman tactics where it's like he's the guy in charge, and that's what it is, and his rules are what you abide by. This really clearly, I think, has very clearly demonstrated to a lot of people that there's a lot of cracks and there's a lot of weakness in his rule and in those around him as well. When you are a strongman ruling by strongman tactics, and suddenly you're shown up to be not so strong anymore, there's going to be a lot of scheming and a lot of plotting by those around him, by those near him, by those who want to be near him. I think it's going to be a really interesting time. The morale blow to Russia is across a lot of places in Russia and a lot of different organizations is going to be relative. It's going to be quite significant, actually. I shouldn't say quite. It's going to be incredibly significant. Not just the army. I think it's going to be within the organizations and the institutions that currently support him. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest that we start to see members within either the internal security apparatus or other PMCs start to try to maneuver to gain favor and gain leverage with the hopes of maybe someone else conducting another attempted coup that doesn't involve a 1,200 kilometer, cannonball run down the M4. So that's, I think there's going to be fallout from this, whether it happens in a week, whether it happens in 3 months, whether it happens in a year. There's absolutely going to be fallout from this.
It's impossible to talk about Russia and Putin without talking about the war in Ukraine. So from Ukraine POV, what do you think, how it does look like?
I think there was a lot of popcorn being consumed across Ukraine over that 24 hours. I've seen more memes that basically highlight the idea, you can bleep this out, but basically let the f***ers fight. I've seen that meme like about 1 billion times, and I've laughed at every single one of them. The Ukrainians have to be loving this simply because it does highlight and it does show that there's some deep fissures and deep fractures that exist within the Russian state and within the security apparatus. Whether they can capitalize on this, clearly, as you mentioned earlier, the counteroffensive has been going on for several weeks now. Lots of people giving it criticism because it hasn't achieved the big breakthrough. I think a lot of us have been absolutely wrecked by the notion that a breakthrough happens instantly. You can thank the 2003 invasion of Iraq for that, where it's like, oh well, you get modern technology and it just cuts through like a hot knife through butter. Was never going to be like that. I think anybody who knew it was never going to be like that. There's still a lot of like heavy grinding that's happening along a broad stretch of the front, looking for those opportunities, looking to get the Russians to commit their reserves. With Shoigu most likely out of the picture, with Gerasimov most likely out of the picture, it's now waiting to see who the Russians select to replace them, and to sort of see what if tactics and strategy changes on the Russian side, how that all plays out. But I think the Ukrainians must certainly have been absolutely loving this. I don't think that the coup, putsch, whatever we want to call this, was long enough or significant enough to really cause any disruption to Russian logistics and supply into the war area. So I don't expect that this is really going to have a massive impact on the current immediate day-to-day operations. But the blow to morale, blow to Russian morale, I think is really the big thing that I would be focusing on right now. We'll see how and if the Ukrainians are able to exploit and take advantage of that if they can. I think I read this morning, but haven't seen verification, that there's crossings of the Dnipro at various points that are happening in areas that weren't necessarily expecting to see crossings. Whether that's just sort of casual probing or whatever, that's possibly something bigger. We'll have to wait and see.
I see. Okay, I think the next couple of days will bring more clarity to the picture, and we'll understand a little bit more. At this point, this is this much we know, and this much we can speculate, quote unquote. So thank you for your time, and I'll see you in our next special episode.
Slava Ukraini!